It has been 4 months since my last weapon tier list, and with 6 new weapons being added to solo leveling Arise since then, it's about time I updated my best weapons tier list. And if you did miss my last weapon tier list, here it is right here, where we have the SS tier with all of the best weapons going all the way down to the D tier with all of the R and also the worst SR weapons. And like I said before, we do now have 6 brand new weapons in the game, but before I do rank those weapons, I do want to make some changes to my previous tier list. And the first change is going to be to West Wind, which is going to go from the S+ tier all the way down to the S tier, simply because this weapon just doesn't see much usage whatsoever anymore, and it can be a little bit inconsistent, especially if you don't crit with it. And then I'm also going to bump down the Demon Knight Spear from the S+ tier all the way down to the S tier as well, which is going to be because I have tested Huntsman and also the Demon Knight Spear quite a lot now, especially in the new Damer's Workshop as well. And to be honest, I found their performance to be quite equal, with probably the Huntsman being slightly better, so I feel like it's fair to rank them equally. And then I'm also going to bump down Night Killer from the A tier to the B tier, because my previous reasoning for this was that this weapon could be pretty useful in Guild Boss. However, even with that pretty decent usage, I still don't think it's in the A tier, so I'm just going to go back down to the B tier. But then the final change I want to make is going to be to the Demon King's Longsword, which is going to go up from the S tier all the way to the S+ tier, because pretty much for around like the 30th time, this weapon got so many different buffs around when the Baron Workshop did come out, which did make the weapon do a lot more damage, so this weapon is now a lot better, so I do think it deserves the S+ tier. Which then does bring me on to the 6 new weapons that we now have, and let's start off with the Demon King's Daggers. And this weapon is an absolute DPS machine, especially through its skill called Crackling Thunder. And this is because through buffs like 2 as 1, as well as also Lightning Rush, and also its A5, you can get a ton of damage increases to this weapon's skill, making it do way more damage than you normally could do. So yeah, I really don't have anything bad to say about this weapon. It does so much damage, it's great for endgame content, which easily for me is going to put it all the way into the SS tier, which will then bring me on to the next weapon on this list, which is going to be the Divine Quarterstaff. And this weapon is very similar to the Demon King's Daggers, because its kit does revolve around increasing this weapon's skill damage by as much as possible. Because when you do use the skill, you do charge up, and then you can then unleash all of your damage. What you're also doing is applying the Mana Power Concentration, which can increase your damage by 100%, stacking up to 3 times. But this weapon does also have other damage effects like the Divine Quarterstaff drop, which can also be enhanced through the weapon's A5. And this weapon is very easily the best light DPS weapon in the game, so it is going to go all the way up into the SS tier. Especially with the new Damer's Workshop out, this weapon is just so good for that game mode. And with hard mode also coming out pretty soon, it's going to be a must-have for it. Fan of the Fire Demon is up next, and this is the latest weapon added to the game and is pretty much designed just to work very well with the Phoenix Soul bow. Because of course, as we do know, the Phoenix Soul does heavily revolve around dealing a lot of core attack damage, and the way the Fan of the Fire Demon supports that damage is going to be not only through the fire damage increases through its buffs, as well as also its debuffs, but also through its own buff Fire Demon. It can do a lot of different things, like increasing your fire damage and MP recovery rate by 50%, but more importantly, this is the reason why it does work so well with Phoenix Soul, and this is because it does increase the crit rate of your fire core attack skills by 30%, as well as also its crit damage by 120% as well. So because this weapon does have so much synergy with Phoenix Soul, I think it's going to be pretty fair to put it all the way up into the S+ tier. This is a very good fire weapon that offers a ton to the fire elements. The Gold-Tailed Fox is actually one of my favorite weapons in the game that they've definitely recently added, and this was a weapon that you could completely get for free, which is very cool. And the main purpose of this weapon is to support your other light weapons, and especially their basic skills, which is going to make it a fantastic pairing with the likes of the Divine Quarterstaff. And the reason why it does work so well with your light basic skills is because of the Foxtail buff that it does apply to yourself, which can increase the crit rate and crit damage of your light basic skills by 12.25%, which can then be further enhanced to 20.24% through your A5 passive. And also it can support your light damage through the Golden Wound debuff, which basically says when the user does attack a target, the Golden Wound effect is applied, which will then increase the user's light damage by 100%. However, this debuff is then instantly removed after you do hit it one time with your light attack. So it does mean you have to pick and choose carefully which light attack you want to use to proc this debuff's extra damage. And also as well, through its A5 passive, again, you can then also further increase your light damage by 20.24% and also your attack by 12.25% as well. Which means with this weapon offering you so many different buffs to your damage with your light weapons, I'm going to put this weapon all the way up into the S+ tier because it pretty much is sort of like a plum flower sword for the light element, sort of. However, I still don't think it's on the level of these weapons in the SS tier, so I'm going to put it into the S+ tier for now. So with all of those great weapons, unfortunately, we are going to have to move on to the spooky pumpkin. And this weapon's main purpose is to increase your wind damage and also just your regular damage, meaning its main purpose was to be used around when the Baron Workshop of Brilliant Light did come out, so then you could support your Demon King's daggers to then do a lot of damage. However, this weapon just isn't very good, because in order for you to apply the Trick or Treat buff, which does increase your damage, what you have to do is stack the pumpkin candy, I believe 10 times, so then you can then apply it. But also, even when this buff is then further enhanced through its A5, increasing the wind damage and also the regular damage dealt buff to 20% each, it just doesn't really cut it, to be honest, because the buff that you do have only does last for 10 seconds, so you're not really going to have much uptime on it, which means you're not really going to be getting the most out of this buff as you want to. But some of the things this weapon does have is the ability to activate the core attack and also to reduce the skill cooldown, so you can activate the buff a little bit more often. But outside of all of that, at least in my opinion, I really don't think this weapon is very good at all, and I really don't ever see a scenario where you'd want to use this weapon over any of the other wind weapons. So I'm going to put it all the way up into the A tier, because just like the secured Marlin surfboard, it's pretty weak, doesn't really offer too much to your account, and overall just really isn't needed, at least in my opinion. Which then leaves the very final weapon to be ranked in this tier list, which is going to be the truth version of the Kasaka's Venom Fang. And this is the latest free-to-play weapon added to the game, and overall is actually pretty decent, because just like the regular Kasaka's Venom Fang, it does have a DOT that it can apply called Kasaka's Deadly Poison, which deals damage over time based on your attack stat, and also can decrease your target's HP recovery rate, as well as also apply other debuffs like Paralyze, so it can CC, and also the Spasms debuff, which can decrease your target's attack, so it gives you a bit more survivability, I guess. But where this weapon really does shine is going to be once you get it to A1, because when you enter an instance dungeon, you can activate the Dungeon Killer effect, which will increase your crit rate and crit damage by 20%, and will also allow Vanishing Shade, your skill, to always deal water elemental damage, which means it can be used in practically every single instance dungeon. And then finally, its A5 does increase the damage of your skill by 150%, giving it a lot more damage. So overall, I think this weapon is actually relatively decent. It's nothing too crazy, so I am probably going to put it all the way up into the S tier alongside Skadi and the likes of that, because this weapon was really made just for new players to then be used in the early game and sort of the early stages of content, so it's not really meant to be the best weapon in the game. However, I do still think it is relatively decent. So there you have it. This is my complete tier list of all of the weapons currently for Sung Jinwoo in Solo Leveling Arise, and overall, I'm pretty happy with that, I think. But of course, if you did enjoy this video, or you just found it useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!